You're not behind because you're slow. You're behind because part of you never moved forward. Notice how money still triggers an older reaction. A pause that doesn't match your life anymore. A caution that feels familiar, not accurate. You respond like the rules never changed. Like you're still proving something, still bracing. Your body reacts before your logic does. That's not instinct. That's memory pretending to be judgment. You tell yourself you're being careful. But careful about what, exactly? Somewhere along the way, time kept moving. You didn't stop. But something in you stayed, and now it speaks first. Every time money listens, you don't wake up thinking about money. It just joins you later, uninvited. It appears in small hesitations. The extra second before you confirm something. The way you reread a price, not to understand it, but to feel it. You tell yourself you're being responsible, reasonable, measured. Those words arrive quickly, almost rehearsed. You notice how some expenses feel neutral, while others feel like a quiet argument with yourself. Same currency. Different weight. You track things mentally. What you can afford, what you should avoid, what feels justified because you worked hard, what feels undeserved even though you earned it. You don't say this out loud, but certain amounts still carry history. They remind you of stress, of limits that once mattered, of promises you made when options were fewer. You observe other people and try to decode them. Not their income, their comfort, how easily they decide, how little explanation they seem to need. You assume they know something you don't, or that they're less cautious, or that they'll learn the hard way. You plan ahead, but only within invisible borders. You imagine growth, but you keep it polite, contained. When money feels tight, you blame circumstances. When it feels loose, you brace for correction. You don't question these reactions. They feel normal. They feel like you. And that's the part almost no one inspects. Most people believe their relationship with money updates automatically. That when life changes, the internal settings follow. New income, new confidence. New stability, new calm. So when discomfort remains, they assume something is missing. More discipline, more knowledge, more control. They consume explanations the way people collect maps. Convinced the issue is direction, not position. There's a quiet faith in optimization, that if thinking becomes sharper, behavior will follow. That clarity arrives first, then ease. But pay attention to how often understanding arrives, without relief. You can explain your situation perfectly, and still feel tension around simple decisions. You can articulate your goals, and still hesitate as if permission is required. The misunderstanding isn't about effort or intelligence. It's about timing. People assume their current reactions belong to their current life. They rarely consider that those reactions were formed elsewhere, under different pressure, with fewer options, with more at stake. So when money creates friction, they treat it like a logic problem. Adjust the plan, revise the approach, reframe the story, yet the emotional response stays the same, because the response isn't responding to now. It's responding to a memory of what used to be dangerous, what used to matter more, what once required vigilance. No one says this directly, because it sounds abstract. But many people aren't mismanaging money. They're misplacing themselves in time. There is a subtle moment when money stops feeling like a challenge, and starts feeling like information. It doesn't announce itself. There's no relief, no confidence spike, no sudden certainty. Just a change in what your nervous system reacts to. Before this shift, money feels charged. It pulls emotion forward. It asks questions before you're ready to answer them. Every decision carries a faint echo of consequence. After the shift, the charge fades, not because money matters less, but because it no longer represents danger, proof, or survival. You begin to notice how often urgency used to drive you, how pressure once felt like responsibility, how hesitation masqueraded as wisdom. This isn't growth. It's alignment. Your internal timing adjusts. Your reactions start matching your actual position, not the one you outgrew quietly. Money stops interrupting your identity. It becomes situational instead of personal, something you interact with, not something that defines your stability. You don't feel braver, you feel clearer. The questions change tone. Less, what if this goes wrong? More, does this belong here? Most people will never detect this shift. If you do, you already know why this channel exists. Nothing external transforms, but internally, there's less negotiation, less self-explanation, less emotional residue after decisions. Money hasn't changed. You've just stopped meeting it with an outdated version of yourself. And that quiet correction alters everything, without trying to. There's an internal rule most people follow without realizing it. Not because they chose it, but because it formed early and never got questioned. The rule is simple, but not obvious. You make decisions according to the version of yourself you still trust. For many people, that trusted version is old. It learned caution when mistakes were expensive. It learned restraint when options were limited. It learned to stay alert because stability felt fragile. That version did its job well. It kept things together. It prevented damage, so the mind keeps consulting it out of loyalty, even when circumstances no longer require the same defense. This is why money can feel heavy without being scarce. Why choices feel serious even when they're reversible. Why progress feels slower than it should. The internal rule isn't about money at all. It's about authority. Who gets to decide what's safe? Who defines what's reasonable? Who has permission to move without explaining why? Some people quietly update that authority. Not deliberately, not dramatically. They stop asking an older self for approval. They stop referencing conditions that no longer apply. They let the present version speak first. When that happens, decisions lose their emotional drag, not because risk disappears, but because relevance returns. Money stops being filtered through memory. It's filtered through position, and that single shift, who you listen to internally, changes the texture of everything that follows, without requiring effort, discipline, or belief. It just feels accurate. When this internal rule changes, the difference is subtle but persistent. Two people can face the same choice and walk away carrying very different weight. One leaves with tension. They replay the decision. They search for reassurance after it's done. Even neutral outcomes feel unfinished. The other leaves with closure, not certainty, completion. The decision occupies the past immediately. You can sense it in posture. One person leans slightly forward, as if trying to stay ahead of a threat that hasn't appeared. The other stands where they are, alert but not braced. This isn't about confidence. It's about internal alignment. When someone is operating from an updated self-reference, money no longer disturbs their sense of timing. They don't rush to catch up to life. They don't delay waiting for permission. Their choices don't feel dramatic. They feel proportional. Conversations shift too. Less explanation, less storytelling around decisions, less need to justify outcomes as responsible or deserved. Not because they care less, because they trust the context they're in. Nothing about them looks impressive from the outside. There's no visible intensity, no urgency to prove momentum, but friction decreases. Energy stops leaking into self-management. Attention stays available. Life stops feeling like it's happening slightly ahead of them, as if they're always reacting. Instead, events meet them where they are. Not optimally, not perfectly, just accurately, and that accuracy quietly compounds, without ever needing to announce itself. Most people spend years trying to upgrade their behavior, when the real update was never behavioral, it was temporal. They think the problem is discipline, or knowledge, or commitment, but the deeper mismatch is simpler. They're still answering questions from a version of themselves that no longer exists. That's why effort feels heavier than it should, why money feels louder than it needs to. Why progress feels strangely out of sync with identity. When the internal reference finally catches up, nothing dramatic happens. There's no turning point, no cinematic shift, just a quiet sense that decisions belong to the moment they're made. Pressure dissolves into proportion. Urgency relaxes into relevance. Time stops feeling like a judge. Money becomes ordinary again. Not small, not solved, just uncharged. You start noticing how many people are negotiating with ghosts. Past fears, past limits, past definitions of safety, and calling that caution. You don't feel superior when you see this. You feel still enough to recognize when a thought belongs to now, and when it belongs to a chapter already closed. If this perspective felt unsettling rather than inspiring, that's usually the sign it landed where it matters. This space isn't built for acceleration. It's built for people who notice the lag, and choose to live in their actual moment. Subscribe when you recognize your own timing here, not as a follower, but as someone who already arrived.